to this webinar on behalf of ACA and on behalf of our members and co-organizers, the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD, Diku from Norway, and VLUHR International from Belgium. Most of you will know that this event was supposed to take place on March the 12th, 3 months ago. Then it fell victim to the corona crisis, as did so many of our activities in internationalization in higher education and in our societies at large. The corona crisis has on one hand led to a temporary shutdown of so many social, academic, cultural activities. But it has also led to an acceleration of many developments, such as the use of online media for international cooperation and exchanges when physical mobility became impossible. Also, the number of participants in this event is testament to that acceleration. In fact, we have twice the number of registered participants than we expected on March 12th. The crisis also highlights some other issues that are central to the endeavor of higher education, such as the responsibility of higher education and research to tackle global challenges like the current pandemic or climate change. One of these issues are the synergies between higher education, research, and innovation of all sorts, the so-called knowledge triangle. That is not really new in the history of higher education. In fact, the so-called unity of teaching and research was at the heart of the Humboldtian and then American university model. But in recent years, people have observed a growing gap rather than a closer neighborship of these aspects. And there is a general feeling that the potential of synergies between research, education, and innovation is not really explored. This idea to enhance that is central to the European policy agenda, from the Lisbon strategy to the next generation of the Erasmus program, Horizon Europe, and the European University Initiative. Then add a fourth component, international cooperation, to make the triangle a tetrahedron or triangular pyramid. This is the specific perspective of ACA and its members. What can international cooperation contribute, both to the quality of and the synergies between education, research, and innovation? With this webinar, we want to highlight what our member organizations and what individual institutions of higher education are already doing to bring about such synergies through their programming and funding mechanism. We also wish to contribute to the ongoing policy discussion on the European level. Both existing good practice and proposal for future developments are outlined in the draft reflection paper that you have received a couple of days ago. In the given time frame, it's not possible, and as you're all literate, not necessary, to repeat what's in there. Let me just underline one key aspect: the benefit and the need of cross-policy and cross-program thinking. Also, and may I say perhaps especially so, when programs are run by different directorates general in Brussels or different national ministries in our capitals. The reflection paper was drafted by the working group that has prepared this event. In the meantime, the draft has been circulated to ACA members and further developed on the basis of their comments. The final version will take account of the results of the seminar today. Let me conclude by some words of thanks. Thanks, first of all, to all of the presenters from member organizations, from universities, and from the European Commission. Thanks to the members of the working group, Ranhild Solvi-Berg, Nina Salden, Renilde Knevels, and Irina Ferencz, ACA's Deputy Director and Director-elect. Let me thank DAAD, Diku and VLUHR, who co-organized and co-funded this event. Too bad we can't benefit under the present circumstances from the generous offer to also help funding coffee and a lunch break and maybe even a vin d'honneur, but there will be occasions to do that later. And let me thank everybody in these organizations and at the ACA Secretariat who make this event possible on the scenes and particularly behind. Thank you for your attention, and I would now like to hand over to Irina Ferencz to moderate the next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ACA President, for these kind words of introduction and for the graceful handover. Good morning to you all. As already mentioned, we've been waiting for a few months now to be able to have this conversation today and organize this event. So let me start by thanking you also on behalf of the ACA Secretariat for your attendance in such high numbers this morning. And as already mentioned, it is my task and my privilege at the same time to guide you through today's program and to act as the moderator of the three upcoming sessions. As we start, please allow me to also emphasize a few points that have guided very much our reflection for the choices we've made in terms of speakers and focus in today's program. Quite often when we talk about the enhancement of synergies between education, research, and innovation in an international cooperation context, we stay at a rather abstract level, especially here in Brussels as a stakeholder organization that ACA is and that many of you in the audience represent as well. This is of course very understandable because we deal with a complex topic at hand and we deal with it in the context of drafting new policies and new programs. But because of this, and going beyond some of the key messages that you've seen outlined from our behalf in the draft reflection paper, we've made a very deliberate choice in showcasing in today's program a number of very concrete hands-on examples of programs, of initiatives, of policies, and also of approaches that through greater synergies between education, research, innovation in an international cooperation context actually translate this wish of synergies in practice and make it a living reality. So we've done this choice in terms of the program, both with the aim to provide some food for thought and inspiration for the developing policies and programs at institutional, national, and European level, and also very much as a conversation starter, trying to utilize these examples to begin a conversation, particularly in the questions and answers part of today's session, to hear from you about your own experiences with integrating and creating better synergies between education, research, and innovation. So those were some of the guiding reflections that have guided us in today's program. And as you will have seen, we do have a dense one ahead of us. So let me begin by briefly introducing the first session, how to bring research to students and students to research, in which, as the title says, I hope very clearly, we aim to dive in and dive deep by showcasing different examples, 3 of them in fact, that show us through different activities how the ultimate target audience, the ultimate beneficiaries, the students can actually be involved in a very concrete way in research activities and vice versa. We have 3 wonderful speakers to guide us in this journey, and you see them all listed here. They will be they will be presenting one after the other. And we will have some time for questions and answers at the end of the session. I warmly encourage you to make active use of the Q&A section of the Zoom platform to let us know of your questions and comments in response to the 3 presentations as we progress. And as the colleagues already instructed you in the chat, please make use of the chat for more informal exchanges. With this, let me introduce you already the first speaker in the person of Christian Schäfer, that works as Head of Unit Research and Studies at the German Academic Exchange Service, or DAAD, an organization that I trust for many of you needs no further introduction. Christian Schäfer has been working for DAAD since 2001 in various capacities, and he is here with us today to share two very meaningful program examples, the RISE and the BARI programs, as well as their interlinks. So without further ado, Christian, I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present our BARI and RISE program at this webinar. The RISE program was started in 2005, and in those days we had the problem that there was a very unbalanced exchange between Germany and the United States. Many more students from Germany going to the United States than the other way around. So we were discussing what are the strengths in Germany with which we could attract students, undergraduate students from the United States. And we thought of German research, because German research is quite well known, especially in science and engineering. And we have this enthusiasm of German faculty as far as research is concerned. Then we thought young people would like to explore other countries in connection with a research project. And the interaction in the lab provides a good opportunity for social interaction and the development of friendships. And additionally, in the lab environment, each one can contribute to the research project, even if the training level is still rather low. Another important aspect was that we have special focus on the up-and-coming researchers. So on the one hand, we give the PhD students a lot of self-responsibility. They decide what kind of project is suggested to the interns, and they receive the applications and they decide what are the best qualified students. And the undergraduate students, on the other hand, can choose on their own out of a broad range of different subjects. Both agree about the timing, so altogether it's a win-win situation for both groups. How did this develop? So first a bit to the process itself. So PhD students make suggestions of internships projects, and they are advertised by DAAD. Then the undergraduate students apply for up to 3 projects. These applications are reviewed by the PhD students. They provide a ranking. And then we do the final matchmaking. And the matchmaking is done on the basis of the qualification of the student, of the demand for the project, and also whether funds are available. Yes, this proved to be very successful. So we could offer a huge variety of research projects on a database, so easy to search, to find, and no tuition fees for the participants, no language barrier as it's all in English, and very close support for young students. We started this for undergraduates coming from summer internship from the US and Canada. We extended it then to the UK and Ireland. And then we introduced also the other direction, German students studying, having an internship worldwide. So these are a bit of the numbers. So the blue line, these are incoming students from these 4 countries. And it was really skyrocketing. And in 2014, we have to be a bit more restrictive with the application regulation, and just to have not too many applications. So in total, we have 300 scholars. So it's a very competitive selection process. And the outgoing students from Germany, this is also increasing continuously. Of course, the maximum number is not as high as the incoming students from all these different countries. And the challenges we face with this. So one challenge, it's not so difficult to convince a PhD student to host an intern, but it's more difficult to convince the supervisors, because often they think that the student should only work on his PhD thesis. in the lab. And then, of course, there is a lot of work with coordination, status questions, individual support of scholars, and also raising the funds to finance all this. Now, with the BARI program, we deal with a somewhat similar problem, because in the Baltic Sea region, we have a lot of the eastern state, more or less, with a lot of strong tendency for researchers to move west, but not such a strong tendency of the western states to move east. And so we thought again that if we start this mobility at the younger level, we might raise the interest in the research environment in the other countries, which might be fruitful with the future development of the researchers. So basically we established it's an Interreg program with 11 partners from 8 countries. And we established a similar thing. Somehow the remote control doesn't work anymore. Could someone help perhaps? The remote control is not working. Yes, thank you. So we have this mobility now in all directions. So Norway to Lithuania, Sweden to Estonia, and so on. And this is one challenge with this scheme, this Europe-wide scheme somehow, is that the countries do not want to have a common pot. So we have to combine funding from each country, which makes it a bit complicated, the organization, and also a bit complicated to get enough funds. And when all this was set up, we had the Corona crisis. And so we couldn't realize it like this summer, but we changed in the following way, because we all hope that things will improve in the future. And there again, this RISE concept is very useful, because it's a one-by-one matching. And so we can develop matching in parallel to the improving situation in the different countries. So we plan for monthly call and monthly matchmaking. So then always these matchmaking can be done with those countries which are open and with those students who are interested to leave their country again. So we hope that this might even help to improve the situation to restart mobility after this lockdown. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, as well. A very interesting example, a fascinating one that I hope resonated with many of our attendees as well. I think the example as such is emblematic in a number of respects. One of the traits that I found particularly interesting is that is an example also of a program that is continuously being upscaled and has gone through a continuous transformation process, in a sense, from being initially a national program to developing an international component, a professional component, and now being applied in the form of a BARI program in a specific world region. We'll do what we announced, though, so we will take immediate questions and comments to your presentation in the dedicated time at the end of the session. And let us move forward with hearing from our second speaker in this session, who is Stephane Faignet, working for the Flemish Agency of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, a very different kind of a national agency, a governmental agency that is in charge of implementing the economic and enterprise policy in Flanders. Stephane is working as a team leader in the Department of Support Enterprises, which is a department that is funding research and development projects of Flemish companies and research organizations, including higher education institutions. And in this particular regard, he will be speaking to us today about the TETRA program and the TETRA Coordinate network. So Stephane, the floor is yours.
Good morning to you all from Belgium. I will present you today, first of all, the agency, and then take a closer look to the TETRA program. I have not yet the control. Okay. So Flanders Innovation and Entrepreneurship is an agency who is the central role in Flanders for supporting the entrepreneurship and growth, innovation, clustering of entrepreneurs in Flanders. So we have a central role. We have 720 million spent in last year on subsidies, but we have also a lot of guidance, contacts with the industry. Our staff is nowadays about 350, and most of the subsidies are for ambitious entrepreneurs. So here you see a lot of funding programs, especially for entrepreneurs. You will see research and development projects, of course, but also for SMEs, we have also transformation funding, growth of companies. And we do have also here with Bakeland, we do also have funding for PhDs in close collaboration with the industry. But that's not the topic of today. Now, in those research and development projects, research organizations play an important role. They are crucial to work together with companies on R&D projects, but they're also very important for knowledge transfer and to spread out the technology towards a lot of companies. And that will be the further focus. Now we have three programs who who are focused on subsidies for collective research and collective knowledge transfer, that are Tetra, Cook, and Landbouwtrajecten, who is focused on the primary sector, so agriculture. The main focus of those programs are the transfer of knowledge and innovative solutions for problems that occur in companies. And those programs are focused on spreading out that knowledge to a large group of companies, especially the non-research and development intensive SMEs. The Tetra project also spreads out the knowledge to non-profit organizations. So I'll focus on the Tetra. Tetra is an acronym. It was technology transfer, but it's not only technology, it's also knowledge. So those projects are mainly focused on application-oriented research by universities of applied science and arts and by universities. Sometimes they work together with a lot of participants. The purpose is the transfer of innovation solutions and knowledge for a large group of companies. What we expect of that is implementation on a short term of that knowledge. But there's a second goal of that program, and that is especially that also we'd like, no, it's needed that the knowledge is also transferred to students. Preferable a large group of students participate, for example, with lab work, thesis, internships with the research project itself. And the goal is the transfer of that knowledge that is being built up in this application-oriented research towards higher education. So new classes, theses, and we hope that the knowledge is transferred and we have a state-of-the-art education with the system. So I give you a first example of a Tetra project. Those are projects, they last 2 years, and roughly it's about 2 VTEs on the project. We have a total budget of 8 million a year. So we are funding about 25 projects lasting 2 years in that program. So The AlterBrew project by Hogent is helping brewers, those are the companies, the goal companies in this project, to implement an alternative unmalted cereals in the brewing process. Yeah, because we have a lot of brewers in Belgium. Most of them are very small and they don't have R&D facilities. So with this project, the knowledge is being built up in a central point and then spread out. So what we like to have in this project is an insight for the brewers, what they can expect by using those alternative cereals to the quality, taste, and tasteability of the new beers. So new beers means economic growth. Unfortunately, we can't taste today. Otherwise, if we were in Brussels, we could have a taste. Another University of Applied Science and Arts that's very active in the TETRA program is Thomas More. They did a project about ortheses, which were 3D printed and then tested by a robot to see if it lasts lungs on stepping. We have also foods being made and then to see whether it's flexible enough. And now they are working on insoles. That's the project running now. So those were two examples. And now I summarize what we like to have in those programs. So you have the target group of companies. Those have contacts with research groups and they are expressing some needs in technology and knowledge. Yeah. The project partners are building up the proposal and there is a guidance group of representatives of those target groups in close cooperation with the TETRA project. So they work close together in that sense that each 6 months there's a meeting, but also in between they have contacts, they guide the project. So to make sure that the results are indeed useful for the large target group and it fulfills their needs. But we have also the students. Students are also asked to work together on the TETRA project. In that sense, we have theses, but that's only a small group each year. But we can also, and we like and we stimulate that, a larger group of students in for example, lab work are working together with the project. For example, for the beer project, a large group of students will have tasting tests in the lab, and also we can do experiments on the whole installation. And in that sense, they are very close to a real R&D project, and they have also contacts with the entrepreneurs of the guidance group, for example. So also that group gets knowledge out of the TETRA project. The guidance group gets knowledge during those 2 years from the TETRA project. But at the end of the project, maybe a network partner is involved to spread out the knowledge to a broader target group. But besides the companies, the TETRA project needs to have a transfer of knowledge also to higher education. And in the better projects, we have also new classes, new student teaching coming out of this project. And by this, we have that the students have a higher education, state of the art, and fulfill the needs of the companies. And when they graduate, they have all that interesting knowledge transferring to the companies. And so we are closing the loop here and closing the gap. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stephane. A highly interesting example, of course, as well, of this multi-directional knowledge transfer between higher education institutions in Flanders of different types, as you've shown us also through your examples, and SMEs, particularly those that do not have an R&D capacity, as you've highlighted, and for whom this collaboration is very clearly very, very beneficial. We'll come back later with questions and comments to your presentation, but let us first hear from the third speaker in this session, who is Sabine Menu, who comes here today as a representative and liaison officer of Epicure, working for the Epicure Brussels office. Epicure is one of the pioneer consortia that was selected last year in the first pilot call for the European Universities Initiative. So we will be hearing soon from Sabine about the specific approach within this consortium for bridging and enhancing the synergies between education, research, and innovation. Sabine also has an affiliation with the Université de Strasbourg, and she's been an associate professor at the EM Strasbourg Business School with both teaching and research responsibilities. So Sabine, I'd like to pass you the floor.
Yeah. Can you hear me well? Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Irina, and all organizers for your invitation and for rescheduling virtually our meeting. That's very important. I'm pleased yet to present the Epicure Alliance, present some results. My starting point is education, as European University Alliances are first of all about education, and more particularly the model of liberal arts education we developed within Epicure. Liberal arts liberal arts and science education, are not a new model, a new educational model as such, as the president of ACA, Ulrich, at the beginning reminds us. This is based on the Humboldtian education model. What is new and what is possible for us through the European universities model is to develop it in an innovative way by sharing as an alliance all the possibilities we have in offering this model to our students and to scale it up. So I had some connection problem before, but I'll skip the video for the moment. My presentation will be on the policy background of European universities, our objectives, and then first results, but we just started, so we won't talk about, well, too many new results and important results as for the previous presentations, and then some conclusions. As you are certainly aware, remember the reference to European university was made in French President Macron in 2017 in his Sorbonne speech. It was not the first time that this idea came to the fore. Several initiatives, bottom-up or top-down, were launched since the inception of European integration with more or less success. We know about the College of Europe in Bruges. We know about the European University Institute in Florence. There has been other attempts that were not so successful, such as a proposal made by the European communities in the early 60s of a European university linked to the Euratom research program. And at the time it was rejected by France. So following the political window opened by Macron's speech, with the support of all the member states, the European Commission set again this ambitious policy objective in 2018, based on bottom-up integrated networks, ensuring a geographical balance and aiming at, not less than this, transform education, mobility, governance. all alliances are based on a mission statement and a long-term strategy. What is EPICUR? It stands for European Partnership for an Innovative Campus, Unifying Regions. It brings together 8 universities located in 6 countries. And I invite you to check our website, particularly in the coming weeks, as it is under progress, under construction, for more information. EPICUR is deeply committed to building a project rooted in the values of a Europe of knowledge without borders. This is in our mission statement. And we in Strasbourg, we are particularly aware of the importance of this being one of Europe's capitals, and having contributed since the very start of the European integration process to develop new ideas how to unify our continent. We are particularly aware how important it is to transfer and European values, to have multilingualism, and to work via cross-border cooperation. Of course, our name also refers to the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who elaborated a positive, empirical, and pleasure-based approach to life. Our key message to students, faculty members, researchers is be epicurious, an invitation to discover new horizons, people, place, cultures, ways of learning. Now coming to our example today. The objectives of liberal arts and science education in EPICUR, and how to bring research to students and students to research. LAs, I will call them this way now, are interdisciplinary courses combining foundations, majors, and electives in natural and social sciences. They are based on research excellence in our respective universities, and we have selected as an alliance European identities and sustainability as 2 new tracks. In EPICUR, we innovate in terms of educational formats. We offer lectures, but also summer schools, role plays, and other practical experiences. Also, we offer the possibility for students to co-create activities by such as academic conferences, and this all counts for credits. By this, we hope to stimulate our students' curiosity, sense of initiative, critical thinking, and reflection, leadership skills, intercultural skills. Our aim is not to train at that stage future researchers, but more broadly, future managers who can articulate complex reasoning in international environments. So in our application, and now what we are implementing are flexible formats that will be available in all our universities and for all our EPICUR students. Our integrated alliance allows for mobility, physical and virtual, to happen more easily. We also are putting in place a digital platform for the students to get the information, register, also have the credit transfer done smoothly. And maybe as time is, time is running, I will then conclude by saying that European University as the new concept and hopefully successful concept launched by the European Commission is for us the right level to organize the synergies between education and research. European universities are testing pilots. The idea is to test possibilities then to be transferred in other networks and to contribute to the European education area. For us, having that link between education and research is very important, and that's why we welcomed very much the possibility via the SWAF School that we are about to submit to today, tomorrow, the possibility to have also support for research collaborations. And I can inform all of you that all alliances, the 17 first selected alliances, have decided in the frame of this SWAF school to set up a forum and to propose this as an activity, a joint activity in the SWAF school to share our intelligence and see the possibility for transfer of pilots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabine, as well, for this highly interesting and palpable example of how the integration of synergies between education, research, and innovation can happen not only in the technical fields, but very much so also within liberal arts education. As we've reached now also the time for the questions and answers part of the session, I'd like to kindly invite our three speakers to join us. And I'd like to start outlining some of the questions and comments that have been raised in the Q&A part. And thank you very much for that. We have a few questions to Christian's presentation. So if you'll allow me, Christian, I will try to bring them together and kindly ask you to address them jointly. One of the first comments had to do with the linguistic aspect that you've emphasized as well, both in the RISE and in the BARI programs. And you've made a point that all communication in English was meant as an approach to reduce the language barriers. Well, one of our participants in the audience is actually wondering if that is so. So could you first of all tell us a bit more about the linguistic dimension of the program of the cooperation? And second, a very hands-on example about the BARI program and about the upcoming calls, given that the current call has just closed. Will there be any future calls this year or in 2021? So could you please kindly yes, answer these first questions?
Thank you very much for these questions. So concerning the language, this is of course a challenge for quite a few people, more or less. But when you want to be successful as a scientist, you have to be good in English, fluent in English. And so if they have this training on a daily basis, but not with the how to say, with the big professors, but with someone from the same age group, especially, and this was of course an advantage when doing this with US or with Canada, with a native speaker, then it's easy for them to practice their English and a good incentive to learn more and to start using it. So I think it's quite a challenge from the beginning, but it's a useful challenge for developing their profile as an international active scientist. And the other question concerning BARI, so we just finished the preparations to have a BARI call every month now, starting in July. And the platform will be open for the first 2 weeks every month, and then people can look what is offered as internship and they can apply. And then in the following 2 weeks, we will do the matchmaking. And then the coming months again, so in August again, the first 2 weeks are for applications. So it will be on a more or less first come, first serve basis now for the coming months, at least until January, hopefully until June next year.
Thank you. Christian, let's take an additional question to your presentation that just came up and relates to the follow-up that you do with the participants in the RISE program. So could you share with us any further information you may have on what's their trajectory afterwards? How many continue in research? How many return to Europe, for example? So what is their study and career trajectory afterwards?
So on the one first, some of them know after this internship that they will do research for the rest of their lives. Others know that they don't want to do research for the rest of their lives, and so it's very good for them to get a feeling what real research is about. Then there is an interesting increasing interest to come back to Germany, because it's for them, especially with US students, it's the first time that they can live on their own without the helicopter parents in another country, and in the safe Europe environment, they realize that they can manage it. So it makes them extremely proud and self-confident. So many of them want to return to Germany. And actually this is, I think, especially when you address undergraduates, this is the right timing to convince them, because after with a bachelor, they go to graduate schools. And once they have chosen a graduate school in the United States, it's very difficult to get them back for a PhD. So actually, they are very enthusiastic about Germany. They are interested, many of them are interested to come back. And what's missing a bit is an offer which you give them right away after this internship, so they are not tempted to go to Stanford, Harvard, and all these fancy universities afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much. But I guess we can also conclude that in a sense, the program does open then new doors in terms of yes, research careers and entering academia. So perhaps that's a good point as well
yes,
in terms
certainly,
of the graduate.
And perhaps if I may add one point, they also use, if they apply for graduate schools in the US, they use this as a special qualification. So in their application, they write, I have been in the RISE program. So this makes it fancy or famous in the graduate schools in the US.
Thank you. Thank you very much for now, Christian. Let us move forward with a few questions to Stephane's presentation. And one of them had to do with the financial support that the companies receive. So they all receive through the TETRA program a subsidy at the beginning. Is it envisaged in any sense in the program or beyond it that once the companies are successful, that they actually pay back the subsidy in one form or another as a means to enhance the sustainability of the whole system?
No, I didn't focus on all the details of the program, but the funding is only for the universities of applied science and arts and the universities who perform the project. The companies do have to co-fund the project partners because we are funding 92.5% of all costs of the universities and so the researchers. And the companies in the guidance group, they have to co-fund 7.5%. But afterwards, no one has to pay extra in that whole system. Only if, but that is not finally the purpose if it is some knowledge is protected by IP, then perhaps a small cost to be paid. But the purpose is to be open and open to all European companies, not only Flemish companies. So the knowledge is spreading out largely.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. And if I may address as a next question, another one for clarification purposes as well. So one of the questions we received has to do with who the entrepreneurs actually are, the entrepreneurs you refer to in your presentation.
The entrepreneurs can be all kinds of companies, very large, very small, but we focus on SMEs. And it's not only technological, but we like to have an economical effect of the knowledge who's being transferred and implemented in the companies. So also topics who deal with economic and management are allowed. It's not only technological, that was at first, therefore the acronym TETRA, technology transfer, but it's more than that. It is also knowledge transfer to facilitate the companies in have a better return on investment, for example, and or broaden the outcome, for example, or more efficient production, for example.
Well,
so we have no limitation in the topics, only that it needs to have an economical effect on the companies itself.
I see, and that relates very much to another questions we received. And if I understand you clearly, so the projects go well beyond the technological R&D understanding, and are also open to economics and management fields, for example. The precondition being that they do have an economic impact, an economic effect.
For example, the example that I give you, the orthopedics, it's not classical companies, but they also need new technologies to make better products and to help the patients. So all topics are allowed. Only military topics not.
We are shortly coming close to the end of the allocated time of the session, but if you'll allow me, I have a personal sort of curiosity as well, because you did mention in the presentation that the program is open to participation to both universities, so research-intensive universities and universities of applied sciences in the Flemish context, and the examples you have shown us come primarily from universities of applied sciences. I was wondering if, once you look at the projects that have been funded so far, do you see also this issue of synergies in the sense of joint involvement of universities of different types within the same project, within the same team, let's say, and then also if you can spot any sort of university type specific approaches in their collaboration with SMEs?
Oh, it depends on the topics. There need to be sufficient expertise to fulfill the project. And so they have to find whether or not a collaboration is needed to have sufficient expertise. Most of the time in a project, 2 or 3 universities of applied science or in combination with universities are combined. So sometimes only 1, but most of the time 2 to 3. It needs to be workable because the funding is per project only limited to 480,000 euros for 2 years. So you can't have very large projects.
Okay, well, thank you very much for now for your answers. And let us move also to Sabine, and we have a question about, well, openness of the Epicure network as such, and whether it is possible for you universities to join the network or be affiliated in some fashion with ongoing activities. So I take it that your approach has very clearly generated quite some interest as well.
Thank you for this question. For the moment, it's a pilot phase, and we are working. It's already a lot of work, and 8 universities to adapt and actually also learn from each other. So this is not the plan for the moment. However, I would like to insist again on this transfer. That's really in the concept of European universities to be able then to say from the pilots, we are now testing what are the obstacles, what is working, how we can transform education, mobility, governance for the future. And this then to transfer it to other university networks and not just for European university alliances. And this, a sign of it is that this morning we agreed in the really final rush of before submitting the SWAF's application that all alliances will be part of a forum to share intelligence and then disseminate what we have learned through that experience. I think that's really a sign of the collaboration we want to have, and I have to say that together with the European Commission, we are really working hand in hand, and that's very helpful.
Well, thank you very much. And actually, my follow-up question would have been really related to this forum idea that you've mentioned just now again. Well, I understand it's a brand new idea, so probably still in development stage and still to be funded. But can you tell us a bit more, if it is already foreseen, let's say, how this exchange will concretely happen between the alliances that have been funded already?
We have every month already and we have had this for the last 4 or 5 months. So really at the beginning of of the European University informal meetings between well, the representatives in Brussels, and then virtually, because of the lockdown, then we had to do it virtually. But it means also that we could expand to those not being always in Brussels. We have these informal meetings with the alliances, and that's our own initiative. So these discussions and this sharing information, how we do on well, certification, on the legal entity, on many aspects of the project, also development, are discussed in a very collaborative way, and hopefully it will remain this way. The forum, for the moment, is planned as happening once or twice a year, and the idea is really to be open to other university networks, but also other partners, as I said, the European Commission, the representatives of the member states, the Parliament. We all need to work together to make that project become a reality. As I said, in the history of European integration, there were many attempts, and let's make it this one a successful one.
Thank you very much, Sabine. That is a powerful call as well, I think, on the value of international cooperation that we're all very convinced of, I am sure. I'd like to now wrap up this first session, and in doing that, I'd like to thank you very much, Christian, Stephane, and Sabine, for your input and for having answered the questions from our audience today. And now we have gotten to a time in the program where we have foreseen a very short break, a virtual coffee break we called it, which I realize might come a bit as a disappointment. Maybe the only advantage that I could foresee is that I very much hope you each have access to better tasting quality and tea than in a typical convention center. So I warmly encourage you to make good use of the break, and we're expecting you back at 11:05 to continue with the second session. So enjoy the break, and see you soon. So welcome back. I hope that you have all managed to enjoy this very short break and are ready to continue with the rest of our program. So we have, as you know, planned for a second session, and it will be a session in which we will be zooming out. So if in the first one we have zoomed in as much as we could, and we have tried to see how increasing synergies can be ultimately beneficial for students as well as for companies and higher education institutions, in this session we will take a broader view, and we would look at links between programs and policies. Therefore, the title of the session that relates to joint programming and outreach, both from a program and a policy perspective. We have another wonderful trio of speakers guiding us through this exploration, and we will be starting very shortly with Torill Iversen Vanvik, who works as Senior Advisor for the Norwegian Agency for International Cooperation and Quality Enhancement in Higher Education, which is currently called Diku. Many of you might know this organization as CU, a long-established organization and player. Torill has been working for DQ since 2013. She is affiliated with Section 4 Higher Education and Research, and today she will be introducing to us a very specific and interesting program, the InPart program. So Torill, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Irina. And thank you for giving the introduction of the organization. It's a long name, so it's DQ for short. So hi everyone from Bergen, Norway. It's been such a pleasure to follow the program up to now. And let me also thank AKA and the member organization for giving us this arena to reflect on policies, policy coherence, action, and results. So I will give a short pitch on the Norwegian program called Partnerships for Excellent Education, Research and Innovation. So it's InPart for short. It's a quite ambitious program established back in 2015 and received a great interest in the Norwegian higher education sector. So the emphasis of the program is on quality enhancement through systematic synergies in the knowledge triangle in the context of international cooperation. The need for the program reflects on some historical features in the Norwegian policy context. context outlined in the reflection paper. So I will confine this short presentation to 3 main points. So the goal and concept, main features, and results so far. So before I proceed, I will briefly outline how I understand the knowledge triangle. So I apply a very broad definition with the core elements of education, research, and innovation. And innovation also understood as process innovation. So the non-technological innovation, such as organizational innovation, engagement of or interaction with external actors, training related to creativity and entrepreneurship. So I'll try to make the slides work very good. So goals and concepts. So the goals, the aim of the program is to develop world-class research and higher education in Norway through long-term international cooperation. The geographical scope of the program is with institutions in the BRICS plus Japan countries, North America, and recently also extended to France and Germany. The ambition of developing academic excellence is sought stimulated through 2 main strategies. So the systematic interplay between high quality research and educational activities through processes of knowledge production across disciplines and sectors. And point 2, partnerships between institutions exceeding collaboration between individual researchers and involving strategic leadership and administration at the institutions in order to facilitate long-term perspective and effect. So the very core idea is to address the needs and reality of the users, hence an holistic approach to the assignment of universities materialized as a researcher conducting research, teaching, and engaging with society. So typical activities are involving students in research activities that might be workshops, seminars, intensive courses, and by developing embedded educational activities, such as integrated courses and joint study programs, and also to further develop the research collaboration through joint publications and applications. So main features. The program was developed and is co-managed, managed jointly by Diku and the Research Council of Norway. So Norway stands out by having only 1 research council supporting research and research-based innovation across disciplines and sectors. So the whole rationale of the program is that 1 + 1 is more than 2. So the combined power, as referred to in the reflection paper by AKA. So the program was commissioned and is funded by the Norwegian government. So it was sort of a marching order. But the prehistory here is that both organizations were individually planning to develop similar programs of long-term international cooperation within an institutional framework. So eligible applicants are universities, university colleges, and research institutes in Norway. The program also applies a pre-qualification mechanism, meaning that eligible applicants must have qualified by already receiving a peer-reviewed researcher and innovation funding from specific sources, for instance, from the EU framework program, Horizon 2020. So the program does not support mere research activities. That's the entry ticket. So results. To develop world-class research and education in Norway is, of course, a long-term goal. I would just like to pinpoint some of the results we see already emerging through internal results reviews and external evaluation. So most of the projects are broad consortia with several partners in both Norway and the partner countries, which are multidisciplinary, cross-sectorial, and Agenda 2030 relevant. Students at master and PhD level are systematically involved in advanced research activities and processes of knowledge production. The projects report on extensive use of student active learning pedagogy and the application of new teaching methods. And we also see integrated courses and a couple of joint degrees. So my last slide, you can see some of the results reported in the survey at the project level. So the most prominently reported is strengthened knowledge base and improved access to complementary academic knowledge, improved network, and improved access to research infrastructure, but also enhanced quality of study programs and enhanced recruitment of students. So let me, ending by listing 3 main points for reflection and further discussion. So the list of results display how international cooperation as a 4th driver for quality enhancement, adding to the synergies in the knowledge triangle, holds the potential to significantly increase the impact and outreach of results. It also displays how benefits for national cooperation through strengthening cooperation between institutions in Norway when engaging in broader international consortia with long-term commitment. And to conclude, when asked a contrafactual questions in an external evaluation, would you have conducted the same cooperation activities without the funding from INPART? A quite high number, 81% responded no. 15% said yes, we would have conducted, but not to the same extent. And 4% yes, we would have conducted the activities without INPART funding. So although there are many methodological issues to take into account when assessing this response, positive response bias for one, I think it gives us an indication of the need for programs enhancing synergies in support of the achievement of related policy goals. I think I end my presentation there.
Thank you very much, Toril, for providing us with this very interesting example as well, that I dare say in many respects is for certain a model to be emulated of a truly co-managed program by an educational organization, or an organization with primarily an educational mandate on the one side and one with a research mandate. I thought it was interesting also to be able to see some of the evidence of what the program has concretely resulted in and of the impact, because as we know, quite often that is an area where we are still lacking very concrete, tangible evidence to prove results. So I thank you very much for your presentation for now. We will come back later with questions and comments to your example, but let us first move on to hear from our second speaker in this session, who is Karla Zimanova, working as a Deputy Director for SAIA, which stands for the Slovak Academic Information Agency. SAIA has been a Deputy Director at SAIA since 2009, has a very diverse expertise, and a lot of this expertise has to do with working with supporting researchers and with the coordination of the Euraxis Slovakia network. So SAIA and Karla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irina, for introducing me. I would also like to thank ACA for this opportunity to present our institutional experience. SAIA is an NGO organization. It is a mobility funding agency. We manage various scholarship programs. We are an ACA member organization, but we are not an Erasmus Plus national agency. Among our scholarship programs, the most important is the National Scholarship Program of Slovak Republic, which has both components, incoming and outgoing mobility. Then we are in charge of, for instance, CPUS program, Action Austria-Slovakia, and in charge of bilateral intergovernmental agreements. We are part of a pan-European EUREXAS network and provide counseling services in mobility and career matters. We have 30 years of experience with internationalization of education and research, but we are rather a small organization with staff less than 20 people, but having offices in 5 Slovak towns. In the graph, you can see scholarship holders data covering the last 5 years. All the scholarships have prevailing outgoing mobility flow, except for the National Scholarship Program of Slovak Republic, which will be in the center of our attention in a couple of minutes. It supports both incoming and outgoing mobility, as I have said, of students for 1 to 2 semesters, but also mobility of PhD students, researchers, university teachers, lasting typically from 1 to 10 months, with application submission deadline twice a year. This is the next slide. When talking about intra-institutional synergies, it is natural for us to carry out activities and have both students, teachers, and researchers as a target group. As an organization, we promote studying and research in Slovakia, typically at several international fairs per year. We participated in 41 of them over the last 10 years. We produce publications about life in Slovakia for students and researchers, as well as specialized brochures on entry conditions for both these target groups. We administer several websites and social media profiles on a scholarship and grants database, which is also targeted for students, teachers, researchers, but also for other target groups, but to a limited extent. But in order to provide a full package, besides scholarships, we are, thanks to being a member of EUREXAS network, able to provide complex information services to both students, PhD students, and researchers, addressing, for example, visa and residence permit, health insurance, working while studying, and other practical issues. It turns out as an advantage, especially at international fairs, where visitors also keep asking questions like that. Moreover, we also organize tours of Slovak university towns, so while the international students and teachers and researchers are already in Slovakia. And within these tours in the Slovak towns, me and our colleagues introduce some historical and cultural background to Slovakia. We have a guided tour in those towns, and internationals have opportunity to sit and talk together in an informal setting afterwards. We organize these kind of tours twice a year, and it is sort of social integration activity for the international, both students, researchers, to feel more welcomed in the Slovak environment. To complement the image, we also provide advice and assistance to the hosting organizations in case they face any difficulties in terms of mobility-related practical matters, especially visa and residence issues. Next slide, please. To explain briefly why this focus on expertise on entry and residence conditions is quite vital for us is due to the fact that over the years, there is a growing ratio of applicants, scholarship holders for incoming mobility from countries outside EU and EEA region. This is true for all groups of students, PhD students, and researchers. But as you can see, the researchers are the group which takes advantage of the program the most. There are obviously other scholarship mobility programs available for EU and EEA countries. This all is something I would call a client-oriented ring or user-oriented ring of direct services. But there is much more going on in the backstage too. Please, next slide. Well, starting from the accumulated experience related to mobility matters, we have developed a practical online application to identify applicable procedures for incoming students, PhD students, teachers, researchers on visa and resident conditions, both from EU and EEA countries and outside. Second, when defining the conditions of the National Scholarship Program, we introduced a special allowance to cover the cost of medical examination for third country nationals required by immigration police. This is a practical example how knowledge from one of our programs, namely Urexes, has influenced another program in a very practical item. We also closely observe the applicable national and EU legislation, especially related to our agenda. We have been active in Slovak legislation, commenting on entry conditions several times, not only watch how the EU directives on scientific visas of 2005 and 16, which is also targeting more groups, are translated in our laws, but we also suggest some positive changes trying to shape the legal environment in favor of our target groups. Some examples being, for instance, easier documentation of blamelessness in case of researchers, proving criminal record only from one country instead of several countries they have resided in, then direct access to labor market for researcher spouses. We try to tackle also the issue of working hours of third country students, which is currently 20 hours per week. In the process, the cooperation with various stakeholders and state authorities is really necessary. The legal changes then require a lot of follow-up activities, including, for example, the explanation of the new rules to staff at embassies and immigration officers, who are often not aware of the amendments, that this is just a peculiarity of our context. In the next step, we have organized trainings and seminars for administrative staff at universities and research organizations to mediate them up-to-date information. Of course, we also invite experts from state authorities to present the topics. Please, next slide. All in all, the described activities require a lot of communication and dissemination. When thinking about how to make some general conclusions from our case story, I've noticed that most of all, it is about looking beyond borders or limits of one program, one department, one institutions. There exist a lot of good practice examples in the Urexes network in many European countries across Europe on local and regional cooperations to provide professional services for researchers and their families. These could also serve as good practice examples to cooperating with students, I believe. These are really very inspirational. In addition, it is enriching to compare various scholarship programs, regulations, even laws, and their implementation in different countries to learn about other examples and take advantage of good practices available for the benefit of students, teachers, researchers, and possibly also innovators. So this is actually the reason why we are all here today, and this would be all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carla, for complementing our picture with this very deliberate example of an organization that has made it as part of its mission to do this joint promotion of education and research opportunities, as well as the provision of joint support services for mobile student staff and researchers. Now let us move to the third presentation in the session, and that will be delivered by Fernando Galan, who is Consortium Manager for the Arcus European University Alliance, and you will have guessed from the name, of course, this is the second university alliance that we have represented in the program today. That was funded through the first pilot call last year of the European Universities Initiative. Fernando has a long experience and track record as well in various organizations, from the Spanish Rectors Conference, Eurasia, European Students' Union, but today he will be obviously addressing us in the context of the Arcus activities, and specifically those activities meant to enhance synergies between the three dimensions of the knowledge triangle. So Fernando, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Irina. I hope you can hear me well. First, I would like to thank ACA and the co-organizers for the kind invitation for Arcus to DAAD, Diku, and to VLUHR. I think it's very timely and also very interesting that you kindly asked us to contribute to this debate. Also, in the light of the draft reflection paper, which I find it very interesting myself, and I must congratulate you for the draft you sent us. And also, I would like to maybe reflect a little bit during my presentation about some aspects that were already included there, or some couple of others that might not be included completely. Arcus, as Irina said, is one of the first European university alliances that have been selected under the Erasmus Plus Hall. But our aim and our mission statement actually goes beyond the 16 call at the moment. So we have a mission statement for 2025, which is quite broad. And at the moment, as our colleague from Epicure, as Sabine said, we are also working on our Horizon 2020 application for supporting also the research and innovation activities. See if the slide moves. I don't know. Yeah, sorry. Perfect. So here you can see the 7 universities that are part of the Alliance, are 7 long-standing, comprehensive and research-intense universities, as you can see. All of them are historical in their context, and also they have deep regional engagement links with the societies they live at and the regions they are based. So as you can imagine, this also gives a profile to Arcus itself, and in terms of what will be the action lines or the priority for us. And in this sense, you can imagine that also Arcus will be comprehensive, but also will have a look at the research aspect as being funded by 7 research-intense universities. Our mission statement says that we want to cooperate, to share our expertise, and to see ways of integrating, to enhance our education, but also to improve our joint research capacity and better respond to the grand societal challenges that all our societies and the whole globe is currently facing. And we don't need to mention the latest one. For that, we have organized the work in what we call action lines, which will be the kind of the work packages, but we prefer to call them action lines. As you know, Granada, it's coordinating the alliance, but you can see that there are 6 actual content action lines, and I will go from top to the bottom. Bergen, the university in Bergen, coordinates engaged European citizens. This is actually an action line that aims to bring together a little bit the rest and the education and the research aspect. It's testing what we want to call it like talent-based learning, and I will elaborate a little about that a little bit later. But it's very interesting and also deeply rooted into the European values. Then we have the action line about the student-centered frameworks for quality learning, which is coordinated by Vilnius. And that's a lot about mobility and integrating mobility. We have Arcus Open Agreement already working, but also about developing joint programs and also about pedagogical development for our teaching staff. So it's a bit comprehensive in the sense of what it aims, but also have a very clear piloting in terms of 3 first joint programs and also some pedagogical training as such. The next action line that you see in your screens is coordinated by Leipzig University, and it's about multilingualism and multiculturalism, because we are 7 universities that use 6 different mother tongues, plus English as a lingua franca, but also coming from different cultural backgrounds. And we really believe that these differences between us are a strength, and we want actually to foster it further and to make it clear also for Arcus itself. Then the next one that you see on the screen, it's widening access, inclusion and diversity, and it's coordinated by Università degli Studi di Padova. And you can imagine that is also an important aspect, and it's also very interlinked to the rest, like not only for the students, but also issues as gender participation in the academic careers, issues about inclusion of refugees, recognition of prior learning. So there are many issues there that also interlink with the rest of the action lines. The next one you see, it's entrepreneurial university and regional engagement. As I said at the beginning, defining the profile of the universities that are members of ARCUS. This is very important for us. And we want to make sure that also we bring together to ARCUS our regions and our business sector, our civil society, our public administrations to discuss some of the challenges they are facing, exchanging some of the experience, etc. And last but not least, you will see that Graz University, it's coordinating an action line focused on research support and early stage researchers development. So as you can imagine, this is quite comprehensive. It is based, the leadership, it is based on the strengths of the different universities. And I would like just to quickly discuss about the topic of the seminar, which is like, maybe knowledge is a triangle, but universities might have also a different shape. We have to think that, as I said, ARCUS, even though this being funded by a call under Erasmus, we thought that it was important already to have an important dimension for research and the links with education. And that was done already at the time that we didn't know if there will be or when will be a Horizon call. It follows our profile as universities, but also this triangle has to be complemented by other aspects or principles or even values, as I said, in terms of widening access, valuing our culture, or testing this challenge-based inter and multidisciplinary education. And in this action line 7, in fact, we are trying to put together groups of students and teachers to work together into challenges that also will have a research dimension, but also a clear goal towards transfers to society. And my reflections lastly will be that for our profile of universities, it's very difficult to draw a line between the different dimensions, and that they are complemented also with other aspects. Most of our teaching staff also do research and transfer activities, and we have seen that evaluating them for their professional career development, it's difficult, but we are also trying that to do in ARCUS to test different approaches for assessment of staff. Rankings has been in the discussion for a very long time, and I will not stop here, but you know already discussions about the different aspects and how important are the rankings about research, but not so relevant the rest. And if we can actually talk about synergies between funding programs, when there is not permeability between both pillars, you can have very interesting complementary funding programs, but if they don't talk to each other, if they are not able to be integrated and interlinked, it still keeps a huge divide between the different actions. And that comes also when we talk about teaching and learning activities. And I will say this is a need to integrate them and not just an aim to aim for. And I think this was very well reflected in the appointment of Commissioner Gabriel, having both responsibilities for education and research. And I think it's a way to continue moving forward in terms of integrating Horizon and Erasmus. And final, and very quickly, you cannot read it very well, but on the left column, you have the modules of the Horizon call for European universities. In the middle, you have the activities that we already foreseen in the Erasmus call, but we're already like having into consideration what Commission was asking us now in Horizon. And on the third, on your right hand, you will see the activities we are planning as complementary activities for those that were already imagined in the ARCUS work program. So as I said, we took since the very beginning that this is a reality for us and we have to continue working in this respect. And we aim that also future funding programs and policy developments also go in these lines, that we cannot establish clear divides between education, research, and innovation. And I think I will stop here and invite you to visit ARCO's website and social network.
Thank you very much, Fernando. Beyond clearly showing us this innovative approach in the Arcos network on the topic under discussion today, also for reminding us that indeed in real life, within the university life, it is not really possible quite often to draw a distinct line between education and research activities. Activities are often intertwined, but that doesn't mean, of course, that synergies can't be further enhanced. Thanks also for reminding us of the broader context, and you've emphasized in your presentation about the need to contribute and respond more progressively to the grand societal challenges, which also is an element emphasized in our reflection paper, particularly through examples we have featured there that link to the Sustainable Development Goals and to the UN 2030 agenda. Now we have a few moments left for questions and answers. So I would like to warmly invite you to join me again in addressing some of the questions that were raised by our attendees. And the first set of questions relate to Toriel's presentation. And Toriel, first couple of questions have to do with the eligibility of taking part in the in-part program. And there was a specific interest of whether, for example, higher education institutions from Israel or from Portugal can be specifically engaged within the program. And then a very important practical question related to the next call for the in-part program and when that specifically is foreseen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for these two questions. So as I mentioned, there's a sort of a very defined geographical scope for the program. And for the time being, it is confined to the BRICS plus Japan and North America and Germany and France. So that's what I can say for now. And the program has been evaluated and the strategy has been evaluated. So there's a discussion now with regard to extending the geographical scope, but that's not finalized. That's pending discussions. So, and for,
would you be able to say when it's likely that the conversation or the decision will be taken on the expansion?
Well, I've understood that there's a dialogue with the sector, universities and university colleges in Norway now, and it's supposed to be clarified in mid-September, and a new strategy will be launched early next year. Yeah. So
thank you. That already gives us a bit of a time horizon to consider.
And so for the INPA program, we conduct annual calls, and the deadline for the next call is on the 18th of November. And the call will be accessible in August, so after the summer.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much for now. We do have a broader overarching questions for all speakers, but I will be addressing that to the three of you at the end of the session. I would like though to ask now maybe a question to Carla, or related to Carla's presentation, because as an organization you've shown us clearly how SAIA has integrated this approach between its education related activities and program and those related to research and researchers in particular. Well, many organizations have this dual mission or cover both set of activities, but this integration, as closely as you've shown us, does not necessarily happen by default. So if you are to reflect on SAIA's experience, can you maybe point to some of the factors that have enabled for this integrated approach, both in terms of promotion and support services?
Actually, in our conditions, this was rather natural activity, because since working in a really small scale, we know about each other's activities, And as I mentioned, the communication is really on daily basis about our program. So it's really natural to think about the synergies. Actually, in working in a small scale basis, it's really a necessity to use synergies between the programs in order to be able to deliver all the activities in best quality available. So this actually win-win situation that we provide both activities for students and researchers and interconnecting them together.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much, Carla, for the response. Let me then address now the question to all of you, a joint question related to the role of mobility and how you see the role of mobility in building bridges between the world of higher education on the one hand and the research and innovation activities. And the colleague raising this question asks us if you can reflect on that based on your own experiences and programs from your organizations. And well, I don't know who wants to start. Maybe we can start with Fernando, whom we haven't heard of yet from in this Q&A session.
Well, I think internationalization is at the core and at the heart of Arcus, and therefore also mobilities play a very important role on what we are trying to do. And what we have seen is like normally the relations between institutions have been channeled through the international relations offices. And this opportunity is allowing us to bring together the different units from the different universities without having to go through that channel. And that's a huge learning experience to get the colleagues in touch. And actually it's working very well. And having these researchers, having the staff being mobile, it's actually something that is being appreciated. We hope we can foster it further in the future, because so far we had just a little bit of a start time and then the coronavirus came in. But we aim, and our vision will be to have staff that could be assigned to different entities, that could work in different universities. So that will also foster a little bit this aim.
Well, thank you. And I take it from that you might mean also it's indispensable, right, to a certain extent for collaboration and for the enhancement of synergies. Let's now give the floor also to Toril and see if she agrees or has any additional points to make on this question.
So student mobility is absolutely a very important part of impact. And we see from the results that students at master and PhD level is systematically involved in high-end research and in the projects. And when it comes to sort of reaching a balance of researcher and students mobility, we see that there's 0.9 students per researcher in the program. So it's absolutely a target group for the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the addition. And then let's hear from Carla, last but not least, on this topic in question.
Well, if I should think of mobility as a way to enhance cooperation between higher education, research and innovation, well, naturally, I think short-term study visits and internships is a way to go because the students get skills important for working in research and innovation. So mechanisms, tools like this would definitely stimulate the future engagement of students in research and innovation. For us, being an academic stakeholder, not really an academic institution or higher education institution, this is a step towards unknown, let's say, but we are trying to do our best and to really network with organizations outside in innovation sector and research business sector, also to provide services interesting for them. But this is still like future for us. But yes, this is also something we are already reflecting on.
Yes, very clearly in your activities. Well, thank you very much as well. And if I may, before closing this session, I'd like to ask another question to Toril that relates a bit to the policy context or dimension. Because we've highlighted, I think, a number of times that the INPART program is a very interesting example of a co-management of a program from education and research based organizations. But there was clearly a very supportive policy environment and framework in Norway for allowing that to happen. Well, if you are to reflect on the experience you have had in Norway, do you think it would have been possible to have such an integrated approach and program had the policy environment, the policy framework not been so supportive? Or if I'm to turn the question around, can one envisage developing in other countries a program like INPART, in your opinion, where the policy framework might not be as favorable?
Thank you again, very pertinent question. And I think Norway, like many other European countries, have had institutional setups favoring links between research and innovation, and the education being sort of locked in a different logic of quality assurance and more standardization. And so there's been a shift in policy in recent years, and this program is sort of the epicenter, one of the epicenters of this change. And I think that we should all enhance cross-program thinking and cross-policy thinking, as the ACA president referred to in the introduction. But I mentioned also that this program is commissioned by the government, and that the organization had individually planned similar programs. So actually, it's been sort of a mix of bottom-up and help from the government. I think the government need to be instrumental and sort of not birth control, but facilitating actually the implementation of policies in order to change the logic of the organizations in the sector. So I think it is maturing, and now as we have more examples, we see the benefits, we have the demand from the sector. So it might be sort of, the Norwegian context has been, is of course very much related to policies in Europe. So I think it should be feasible to transfer this with a mix of governmental instruction and the demand from the sector. So yes, we need to facilitate the cross-program thinking.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your answer and this reflection on what might be transferable in other contexts, and of course under which circumstances. You've highlighted the role of government, which I think is indeed a very important one, and we see that very clearly articulated at the moment in the wider conversation about enhancement synergies by other stakeholder organizations, and particularly in policy development related to the European research area, upcoming communication, and also the European education area. But that is something we will be discussing in the next panel. And now I would like to warmly thank you again very much, Toril, very much Stephane and Carla for the input in this session. And now let us move forward to the final panel in today's program, which as you will have seen already, of course, foresees input and an exchange with colleagues from the European Commission on the wider topic of the European Union's approach to minding the education, research and innovation gap. Now, of course, the topic of synergies as such is not a new one in new policy circles. Enhancing the knowledge triangle has been there with us as a a policy goal for quite some time. But I think we can agree that in the past couple of years, and that relates to a number of policy and program developments, we have new momentum, and we have reached to an understanding that we need to make further efforts into aligning these goals. We're lucky to have in the session with us today two prominent colleagues from the European Commission, and let me briefly introduce them to you before handing them over the floor. The first is Vanessa Debier-Santon, who is Head of Unit for Higher Education in the Director General for Education and Culture. Vanessa is coordinating a unit that manages, as many of you certainly know, important files such as the European University Initiative, automatic mutual recognition, higher education qualifications, as well as, of course, very importantly, the higher education arm of the Erasmus Plus program and of the next Erasmus program. And together with Vanessa in this session is Apostolia, or Lia in short, Karamali, who is Head of Unit for Academic R&I and Research Organizations within the Director General for Research and Innovation, or DGRTD in short. The unit that Lia coordinates designs, implements, and monitors policy initiatives in support of higher education institutions, research organizations, and researchers as part of the European research area, but not only. They have prepared for us a joint presentation, which is, I think, in perfect sync with the topic of synergies that we are addressing today. So I'd like to warmly give you the floor for an update, both in terms of policies and programs at EU level.
Thank you very much, Irina. And I would like to thank everybody for all. Hello, now everything works, I hope. So thank you for the introduction. Despite the order of the mentioned in the program, I will start. So I am Lia Karamali from DG Research and Innovation. I will start this presentation, but as Irina already announced, we're going to interact with Vanessa because we have prepared this jointly. First of all, I would like to thank you for all the useful examples and suggestions that were mentioned before. I think this is a topic where we all agree in principle, and the challenge ahead of us is to make it work in practice. In other words, come up with a functional toolbox that can be at the service of citizens, be them students or researchers in our institutions in general. So we have prepared the presentation, which should not be considered exhaustive, but rather illustrates some key examples of areas where working together. So first of all, this is the outline of our presentation. We are going to share with you information on how we're trying to address synergies at the level of our policies, at the level of the respective programs we are managing, then what we can do for projects, institutions, and people, and then other cross-cutting aspects such as international cooperation, citizen engagement, and outreach. And without further ado, let me start with the policy dimension. As Irina already announced, the key policies which are concerned in this area are the European research area and the European education area, with a very increased focus on towards the universities of the future. And we will come back with more details on that. So first of all, as already announced by previous speakers, the fact that we have one commissioner, Commissioner Gabriel, responsible both for research and innovation as well as for education, culture, and youth, makes this synergies effort even more binding politically. There is a strong engagement to make these two policies, European research area and European education area, work together. Although they are distinct policies, still they're intertwined, and they're both instrumental in delivering quality and values to our society and citizens. And they cross and cooperate in many areas, such as investments, reforms, how to address talent, how to address the digital dimension, international dimension, and so on. But we come with more details later on. So let me start with by briefly recalling the broader context we're operating at. So first of all, of course, We have a broad long-term policy objectives, and we are all challenged by a very unprecedented crisis, and also an effort towards recovery and actually making a fresh new start without losing sight of all the long-term objectives that we have. So therefore, we share an objective for competitive sustainability. In other words, further pursue the transitions for the Green Deal, and make sure that we mobilize all the sectors of the economy and both education and research towards this objective. We both share the challenge of digital transformation, and we are being through this at the moment. We have to make this sustainable for the future, and of course, as I said before, we all need to address the recovery in the most effective way without looking backwards, as our commissioner, as our president von der Leyen has repeatedly recall, but rather thinking of what we can deliver for the next generation, hence the name of Next Generation EU for the recovery package. So let me say a few words about the European research area, and then Vanessa will further develop the European education area and the universities. So first of all, we are in a process in the European research area where, of course, we don't start from scratch. There are 20 years of heritage of the European research area in terms of efforts, and even 10 years of it being deeply embedded in the treaty for the functioning of the European Union. So there are many, many lessons learned from the past, and we are now in the process of seeing how we can revitalize it, to use a term which is being used at the Council, or renew our approach for the future, of course, taking into account all these policy contexts that I was mentioning before. And we're looking at three main objectives for that, which are listed here in the slide. There could be others, as this communication, of course, is now under preparation. For example, but the key, let's say, principles that come from our discussions, also with taking the inputs from stakeholders, are directionality, inclusiveness, and connectivity. Directionality means joining forces, which is the history of the European research area and the history of the European Union, by the way, joining forces towards shared objectives, towards investment, towards making Europe a leader in all the areas we think this is useful to. Inclusiveness means, while pursuing excellence, also making sure that we include all the actors and all the sectors of the economy and the society. And connectivity is connecting the dots, what it means, and making sure that that we interact at European, at national, at regional, even local level. We promote place-based innovation, for example, and so on. So these are the broad objectives we're pursuing, and in that, of course, we're looking at what we can do for the labor market of researchers, what we can do more, how we can promote growth, how we can address what we can do for institutions, and how we can find solutions for the economy and the society. And of course, we're addressing both institutional aspects, legal and financial barriers, but also support services. And I'm glad that some of the elements we're working on have been mentioned, such as the European universities or even Euraccess support services, for example, just to illustrate. Now, let me pass the floor to Vanessa to further develop the European education and area and higher education aspects. Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Leah. So I don't have yet such a beautiful slides to present in the European education area, simply because the timeline is slightly different, as you can see on the slide. Okay, I lost the view of the slides, but it's okay. So the communication, the European research area is going to be presented early this summer, while the communication, the European education area, will be presented this autumn. The European education area will cover all the different fields of education training, including school education, adult education, vocational education training, as well as youth. But of course, there is an obvious link with the European research area, which are our joint work together with DG Research Innovation on the transformation of higher education institutions into the universities of the future. And this is Ulrich who said it rightly at the beginning of this webinar. What we have seen with this COVID-19 crisis is the need to accelerate the transformation of the higher education sector, of the higher education institutions on all their different missions. And this is where we will have some elements between the two communications that forms the two legs of the European knowledge strategy, which is the overarching strategy beyond these two areas. And here there are common objectives with this European knowledge strategy, which is to include all different learners and the types of higher education institutions, so that no one is left behind, include all types of researchers as well and staff. It's important to invest in this European knowledge strategy, and I will come back to that later on in our presentation, and to innovate. Important to innovate both in education but also in research. So these two communications will not develop a full narrative on the European universities yet. What these two communications will present is a roadmap of initiatives and of actions that will be rolled out in the coming years. So before I present some of these elements that will be addressed by the European education area, I would just like to complement what Sabine and Fernando said previously on Epicure and Arcus, two of the 17 European universities. We made a very quick survey in the course of May to assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here it was very interesting to hear from all the more than 100 higher education institutions that are taking part in these first European universities. More than 60% of them consider that being part of European universities has put them in a stronger position to face the pandemic. And these are certainly the ones that were more advanced in the implementation, while more than 96% wished their European university was fully operational before the pandemic. Why? Because those that are already prepared have been able to put together what they have in common in terms of online resources, online teaching and training, share common learning, teaching infrastructure and an environment for their learners and staff to share and to cooperate together, but the same on the research side as well, to share data and research infrastructure. So it shows that there is even more need for deeper cooperation between higher education institutions, but also between universities and their surrounding innovation ecosystem. So if we move to the next slide. Thank you very much. Last Friday, we had a webinar, a joint webinar between the 17 European universities and the member states, the representatives from all the ministries. And it was very interesting to discuss together what are the challenges that these European universities are facing, and that can be the catalyst for further policy development that will be beneficial to the wide higher education community. So this is why in this communication, the European education law, we want to take the lessons learned already and to address them. So we will propose a council recommendation on European universities next year to address these challenges, but that will not only impact the European universities, but also the wide higher education community. Building on such an instrument, what we are aiming at is to develop a collective vision on the universities of the future, targeting all types of higher education institutions, but also covering all their missions. So not only on education and training, but also, as importantly, on research and innovation, leading to service to society. And this, we want to develop it collectively with all of you, with the wide higher education community and research community as well together. And this is really a joint work between DG IAC and DG R&I, and we will organize quite a number of targeted consultations in the second half of the year to really co-develop it and co-create it together with all of you. Now, to make this collective vision, we have already identified some policy developments that are necessary for deeper cooperation within the sector. So one of them is the setup of a European degree, where basically when a student will benefit from learning training opportunities, not only from one or from two universities, but from several of them, which is the objective of our future vision of universities. So we need to be able to recognize and to award such innovative and important training. And this is one of the commitments that we received from the European Council in their conclusions of December 2017. So this is one area where we want to further cooperate with you to develop it, and we are in a brainstorming stage currently, but we hope next year to be able to put forward some proposals. We are also exploring jointly together with DG and I to explore the feasibility of a European university status. What they told us is that they need to set up a status to be able to share budget, to share staff, to share resources, and for that stages need to be found. So some different European universities are currently testing different stages. So we will build on that together with other different studies to explore the feasibility of such a European statute that would benefit not only the European universities, but all higher education institutions which would like to deepen their cooperation. Another field, excuse me, Leah, I'm almost finished, not yet. Another area that we have identified as a way to further develop our policies. This is the setup of a European approach for micro-credentials. What does it mean? Today, what we see is that Europe, and not only Europe, is going to face an unprecedented economic crisis. The workforce will need to be retrained, upskilled, reskilled on certain areas. And here, higher education has a key role to play in developing short learning courses that are leading to micro-credentials so that it can be recognized either for further learning or by employers on the private sector. So our commissioner, together with Commissioner Schmidt, have put in place a group of experts. They met for the first time on 26th of May. And we started discussing a common definition for this micro-credential, which is currently missing. And also we started discussing a roadmap of actions that would boost the take-up, but also the validation and the recognition of such micro-credentials, where again we would like to increase the role of higher education in that respect. And last but not least, what universities need to develop such a vision and to develop and to become universities of the future, we need to develop a European quality assurance system that is more flexible and that it is fit for purpose to develop such deeper cooperation in learning and teaching activities between higher education institutions. So in a nutshell, these are the initiatives that most probably may be announced in this communication, the European education area, and they will be further developed together with you in the months and years to come. So now we need programs, European instruments to be able to support these policies that will be announced in both communications, European research area and European education area. So I will not, so one obvious action that will really implement the necessary synergies between education and research is obviously the European Universities Initiative, but not only. I'm not going to present again the concept because it was very well done by Sabine and Fernando previously, but maybe what I would like to share with you today is the feedback that we discussed last week with the European universities in terms of reforms that they are going to accelerate. Already starting for some of them, starting in September for the new academic year, which is putting in place a fully functional digital European inter-university campus where they can put together the universities together, their online learning and training opportunities for all their students so that they can benefit from learning opportunities not only from one, but from all the members of this alliance. And for this, they are developing and sharing joint digital learning environments with common digital governance tools. This will allow them already from the next academic semester to propose joint teaching units and blended courses and blended mobility to all, well, to many of their students and staff. And they are as well developing these joint teaching units and blended courses in cooperation with their innovative surrounding ecosystem to implement a challenge-based approach together with companies, regions, and cities, not only to develop micro-credentials, but to work together on learning and training offers, but also on research opportunities together. So that was in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you today. Now, if we move to the next slide, Leah will present you the complement from Horizon 2020 for the research and innovation dimension of these European universities.
Thank you, Vanessa. I see that we are running out of time, so I will try to accelerate the presentation of the remaining slides. So again, on my side, I'm really happy today to listen to the very positive reaction of the 2 of the 17 European University Alliances today about their support to this Horizon 2020 action for European universities. On our side, we also share a lot of the enthusiasm that this can be helpful in this very important endeavor. So indeed, the deadline for the submission of proposals for the first batch is this week. So we're looking forward to receiving all your proposals and seeing how we can bring together the 2 dimensions, the 2 very important dimensions of universities we are discussing here today. We have worked on the basis of a guidance document that lists a number of challenges. We have called them transformation modules for research and innovation that you can see here on this slide. That go from developing common science agenda, sharing resources and infrastructures, actions for the human capital, researchers in particular, mainstreaming open science, engaging with citizens and society, reinforcing academia-business cooperation on the research side, focusing on the knowledge transfer, and finally exploring joint structures. The second, as soon as we have the results of the second call of Erasmus, of course, we will proceed with the invitation to the second batch of European universities to submit proposals for Horizon 2020 and thus complete the family of the Horizon 2020 testbed or project portfolio. As we look now towards the future for the next MFF, of course, we're looking into how we can mobilize Horizon Europe in a synergetic way with other union programs, in particular, in this case, Erasmus, but also InvestEU, ERDF, ESF to share common objectives, especially when it comes to institutional actions. and mobility, and increasing opportunities by joining forces. The synergies are a very important dimension of Horizon Europe, and we're looking into how this can be done in practice, and we hope that the experience that you have now with the top-up of Horizon 2020 is a good example of how we can join forces going to the same direction, although there may be some administrative work to pursue still. I think it shows that we're working hand in hand towards pushing towards common objectives. The big highlight when it comes to the next MFF, of course, is Next Generation EU and the recovery of the EU out of this crisis. And research and innovation is very prominent in the recent Commission proposals, both with a booster, allowing the term to Horizon Europe, to focus especially on the necessary transitions and also the recovery of the actors of the economy. You can also find very important traits of research and innovation also in other building blocks of the recovery plan, in particular under the actions for member states in the resilience facility, for example. And now we have to see, of course, we have to see what will be the reactions from Council and Parliament and softly see how this can work in practice. But this is only the beginning. We just had the Commission proposal. And of course, needless to say that there has been, I don't have to recall all the different actions that the Commission has taken for research to support the handling or the response to this crisis, ranging from flexibility for ongoing projects to the pledge event to increase the budget and join forces for the important actions, in particular for finding treatments and vaccines and testing methods, going of course up to the cooperation with member states, what is known as the ERA versus Corona action plan developed jointly with the Council in order to see, have a very first example of how the European research area can work in practice. And when we're looking towards the future, of course, we're looking towards an integrated recovery plan that takes into account the education dimension. But let me pass the floor now to Vanessa for these additional elements.
There will be as well an Erasmus recovery action where the objective is really to support all higher education institutions in developing this deeper cooperation step by step. So through all the different cooperation projects that will be available through the program, with the objective to make higher education greener, more digital and more inclusive. You see that the starting point in the budget that has been proposed by the Commission is already reinforced as compared to the current budget, but of course, as Leah said, this is only a starting point of the coming discussions. And the objective will be to build strong synergies with all European instruments in order to support all higher education institutions in developing step by step their transformation into the universities of the future. They will need the support not only from Erasmus+, not only from Horizon Europe, but also from the structural funds, Digital Europe, InvestEU. So this is why we are building strong synergies with all these instruments, and they will need as well on top support from their national governments as well. But the objective is really to use all these instruments in the same direction, in this collective vision that we'll develop together. Now, maybe more concretely, and building on the excellent already reflection paper that you have put forward, and based on all the previous very interesting discussions that we had just before. Indeed, our objective is really to boost the synergies with research beyond the European universities with a step-by-step transformation, with the objective, as was said previously, to equip the students with the 21st century skills, including critical thinking. And here, this is why it is so important that all students from all disciplines and at all levels be exposed to research teams as early as possible in their courses. It can be through internships in research teams. It can be through inviting researchers to teach and to share their experience and their research work together with the students, but even better than that, to work together with the students, with companies, cities and regions on their research work. So this is what we want to further develop in the future Erasmus program in synergy with Horizon Europe. So some examples in the very concrete examples. Yes, if we move again forward. So this exposure to research from students and staff, it can be done, as I said, through mobility internships to Horizon-funded research teams, but also to really have in these different projects, be it Erasmus or Horizon, to invite either researchers in the Erasmus projects or to invite Erasmus student and staff in the Horizon project to further develop these synergies, expose young people to this critical thinking mindset, but also give the opportunity to the researchers to feedback into education about the results of their research, and also to learn from the latest research results in terms of innovative pedagogies. How can we, through Erasmus, better exploit the research results, innovative pedagogies to further develop and further innovate in curriculum development and in teaching and learning. We will as well further develop opportunities for doctoral candidates so that no matter what their status is, they can benefit from a wide range of opportunities through Erasmus, which are generally short-term opportunities, but that are complementary to the opportunities provided through the Marie Curie actions. And Lia, you want to complement on that, on researchers?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. So indeed, the issue of mobility has been raised before. So indeed, this remains an important priority. The balanced brain circulation of research and innovation talents, as well as education talents, of course. How we can boost teaching skills of researchers to transfer research results into education. So this is a very important element, a challenge for synergies. And also to boost permeability and employability of talents across different sectors, borders, and disciplines. We're looking into questions of how we can retain and attract talent, how we can create transnational ties between researchers within and outside Europe. This is about attracting talent from outside Europe, and of course, how to better access intersectoral mobility and how to incentivize mobility in less obvious destinations. Now, the last part of our presentation is about the cross-cutting aspects, as I mentioned before at my introduction. So here we're looking at the geopolitical dimension, the citizen engagement, and outreach. Regarding the international aspects, it's needless to say that in order to be a leader in the global geopolitical context, we need to have an openness to the world. We need to establish strategic partnerships, both for research as well as for education. This is to address several aspects, for example, the technological sovereignty, or looking at student visas around the world and attracting talent, as I was saying before. It should be about offensive and defensive interest. And just to illustrate an example of a recent activity to which you have, some of you have been associated, the issue of foreign interference in higher education institutions, where we have been working together with our colleagues from DGAC in order to develop guidelines for higher education institutions and research organizations in general on how to address foreign interference threats. Citizen engagement is another example. This is about engaging with our society, assuming responsibilities both from the research and education dimension in promoting values to society and citizens, in promoting lifelong learning and democracy. And last point on my side, outreach. So Again, I said at the beginning, this is not an exhaustive presentation, but if I want to flag a major outreach event, which will be completely virtual, especially in this complex situation that we find ourselves in, is the second edition of the Research and Innovation Days, planned for the 22nd to the 24th of September this year, where we plan to address have a broad debate on the European research area communication, which will hopefully be published by that time. And under the guidance of our Commissioner Gabriel, we will have specific events on synergies between research and education, synergies between the European research area and the European education area, hopefully with a communication on the European education area adopted by that time. And also consultation and exchange of views on the universities of the future, addressing both dimensions. And with this, I pass the floor to Vanessa, and thank you very much for your attention.
This is the last slide. I will finish with this one. In terms of outreach, we're going to launch a wide public consultation in the coming weeks to take the lessons learned from the COVID-19 crisis, to be able to take that into account to before presenting the renewed digital education action plan. So we will invite the wide higher education community, but not only, all pupils, teachers, parents, to share with us their feedback from this experience, so that we can learn from it and propose adequate solutions to that for the month and years to come. We will have as well numerous targeted consultations to co-develop together this vision for the universities of the future, and we will co-organize it together with the unit of VLUHR. We have as well, a similar event than the RNI Days, which is the Education Summit, which is a fantastic opportunity to discuss the progress made, but also to look forward to the future in terms of education and learning. We are still discussing whether this will take place this year still or early next year. And I see that there are quite already a number of questions in the chat box that we'll be very happy to reply.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you very much, Leah, for this true tour de force presentation. If I may say, you've highlighted a number of times, it's not a comprehensive one, but I can tell you that at least from my end, it sure look very, very close to that. Clearly, a number of very exciting developments coming up, both on the policy framework as well as concrete programs at EU level. And indeed, because we do have quite a number of questions here addressed already and limited time available, let's just quickly jump in with the first set of questions for Leah, and the first one relates to what is particularly meant through inclusiveness in the European research area and in the strategic objective of more inclusive and fair R&I systems. So Leah, can you yes. tell us a bit more of how inclusiveness is defined in this framework?
Yes. I see there is some delay in showing up the video. Yes, okay, but you can hear me. Okay, so as I was saying before, this the communication and how the Commission's position on the future of ERA is still under preparation, of course, right? So we hope to be able to adopt this communication before the summer break. Nonetheless, there has been an extensive interaction with the Council, with an opinion provided by the European Research Area Committee, pointing to these three objectives I was mentioning before as a position coming from Member States, in particular with respect to direction, inclusiveness, and connectivity. So we think what is meant with inclusiveness in this new context of ERA is meant that we need to include all actors, all sectors, and all dimensions of Europe in the effort and in the strive to excellence. We should leave no one behind. Another example or another phrase which is known is how to advance Europe together. So there we take into account, among other things, the widening dimension of research and innovation, of course, and as I said before, including all actors. So this is, let's say, the spirit of this objective. And here we're thinking and we're analyzing different actions on how to address and fulfill the objective.
Well, thank you very much for this answer, and maybe as a follow-up clarification question, still both for you, Leah, and for Vanessa. It's not there in the questions raised by the audience, but you referred in your presentation to the EU knowledge strategy, which was received with quite some excitement some months ago when Commissioner Gabriel made a first reference to the strategy. Now, if I understood correctly from your presentation, basically the strategy will be supported by the two upcoming communications, so on the European research area and on the European education area as main pillars, and they will be linked somehow through the wider developments that are happening within the framework of the Universities of the Future discussions. So will the strategy concretely consist of that, or will there be a broader, let's say, umbrella dimension linking the different pillars?
So maybe
yes, everything is under discussion at the moment, but it's the way we will articulate both the European education area and the European research area and all the supporting instruments in that direction. It's really to articulate and the synergies between these two legs. Leah, you wanted to add something.
No, Vanessa, I think this is the essence of the answer. Thank you very much. Nothing to add there.
Okay.
Well, then let's continue with you, Vanessa, and a number of questions. I think, well, very much expected. A number of them refer to the European Universities Initiative. A first very concrete one relates to the when the selection results of the second call are likely to be announced. And also, perhaps in that context, a question about the selection criteria of whether the link between education and research has been amongst the main criteria for evaluation.
Yes, so the results will be announced in the first half of July. The executive agency and the experts are working very hard to maintain this timeline despite the crisis, but we managed to all work independently from home and to stick to the timeline. Now, regarding the evaluation criteria, they are the same as in the first call. Can you hear me? Yes. And of course, this articulation between education and research is present in all the award criteria. First, in the strategy and the relevance of the strategy proposed by the Alliance. Secondly, in terms of the work packages to support this strategy, and within this strategy, these synergies are very important, as highlighted in the call. Then it is also evaluated in the context of the capacity of the partners to implement the strategy, and finally in the dissemination.
Right, maybe two final questions very briefly, 1 minute to answer, Vanessa, on two very different topics. On the one hand, micro-credentials, if you can give us some examples of which topics could be or would be covered. And then clarification question related to blended mobility and the proportion that you see or the European Commission foresees as desirable between digital and physical mobility components.
Well, I will start with the second question. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to that question. First, because we're going to start with blended mobility, piloting it now as from the next academic year. We don't know yet when physical mobility will be feasible again. So we're not going to set an ideal proportion. And of course, it depends as well on the purpose of the blended mobility, depends on the context in which it will take place. So here it will be based on the evaluation of the national agencies and the higher education institutions themselves, and we'll be learning by doing all together. Now, regarding the micro credentials, the first objective is to come up with a common definition that is fit for purpose, not only for higher education, but also for vocational education and training, etc. So this is the first element where we are progressing, because now what is hampering the development of short learning modules leading to micro-credentials is this lack of common understanding. So that's the first objective. Then we discussed the very important challenges in this policy development. One that came back very frequently is to ensure the portability of these micro-credentials across the sectors between VET, higher education, but also across the countries. The importance of transparency and the importance of quality. And here the quality, we had many lively discussions that will continue in the months to come. Of course, we have already in place a number of tools and instruments in the field of higher education, like the CTS, the ESGs, the quality assurance framework, but is it really fit for purpose? Does it need to go a little bit beyond and to bring some more flexibility? And then when it comes to micro credentials that are provided by the private sector or in other fields, here the challenge is even bigger. So these are some of the topics that we are discussing with all the experts that come from very different backgrounds, from first across the different member states, but also we have experts from higher education institutions, from ministries, from quality assurance, national agencies, etc. It's really important to have this diversity of expertise when talking about the progress that needs to be made.
Well, thank you very much. And I have to say, I regret very much the fact that we really have to wrap up the session at this stage. I think we could have definitely continued for much longer into the afternoon, but just to maybe restate the obvious beyond saying thank you very much for your dense input today, to also emphasize that, of course, as ACA and as an organization, we very much look forward to continue this dialogue with you, the colleagues in the European Commission and the broader sector very much beyond this event as well. So thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you very much, Leah. And I'd like to hand over to the ACA president again for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
This is a wrap up. This is not conclusions, but still let me mention three aspects that I found very stimulating in this webinar. The first is to see how important different cultural perspectives and academic traditions are for new ideas in teaching, in research, and in innovation. Even under the current circumstances, this is the case, but of course, much in that depends on spontaneous communication. And so we hope that we'll have that again soon. The second aspect is that international cooperation gives access to, as our colleague from Diku called it, complementary knowledge. In fact, so many great research and real life challenges are too big for any individual institution or nation to tackle. And I think it's very important, from basic research to practical innovation, like a Corona app, for example, or a vaccine. It's important to give that access to complementary knowledge to our academic communities. And the third aspect is how important it is to empower institutions and the academic community to develop those synergies themselves, not top down, but bottom up. And the European University Initiative is a fine example for that. I'm very glad that we heard from two of those projects, Epicor and Arcus. They're very strong in inventing not only acronyms, but also in developing new initiatives. And I'm glad ACA has supported this project from the start. I'm glad to see now some flesh to the bones and some concrete example for cross-programming, even if cross-programming may take a couple of minutes longer than working separately. Let me conclude again by thanking those who helped co-organize this, the ACA Secretariat and the three member organizations involved. Let me thank all of the speakers for their very interesting and stimulating contributions. Let me thank those more or less invisible hands who helped us to organize the Q&A. Ranhild, Nina, in Grenilde. So that was very helpful for all of us. And not last, let us thank all the participants. I think 152 are still bearing with us, but we were more than 200 for most of the session. So thanks to all of them. Corona has not stopped us in organizing this, and it will not. Stay healthy. Goodbye.